The following time-slip event happened to Morris from Pontyclun in South Wales, possibly in the late 70s or 80s. At the time of the incident, William Morris was a civilian driver in the motor transport section of RAF St Athan in the Vale of Glamorgan in the southeast of Wales. William said that the type of work he did would often keep him on the road for weeks at a time, so he would regularly stay overnight at a bed and breakfast. On one particular summer, he had to take a load to Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, which was a distance of approximately 142 kilometres and would have taken him just over 1.5 hours to drive. It was evening when he arrived, and he saw a bed and breakfast sign, so he immediately pulled over. It was a modern-looking, single-storey detached house and set back in well-kept grounds. The sun was starting to go down, and all the curtains and blinds were drawn, and he walked to the rear of the house to ring the bell. Almost immediately, the door was opened by an elderly woman dressed in male gardening clothes. After asking the lady whether she had a room available, her manner was extremely abrupt, and she said, "For how many?" "Only me," William replied. "You have a car?" she said. "No, I have a lorry." Her manner then changed, and she took him to a large room with a huge bed, and for some strange reason there was a child's toy propped up on it. William asked the lady the cost, and she replied, "Oh, we'll settle that in the morning." He then collected his overnight bag and started walking back to the house, but was suddenly startled as the woman stepped out in front of him from a willow tree. "What will you require for breakfast?" she asked. William said, "I'm not particularly fussy," and she glided away. William then settled into his room before heading to the bathroom, where he found everything was old-fashioned, from the toilet, the pipework, and the bath was sitting on feet. When he went back into the bedroom, he found a pile of comics and magazines, such as Film Fun, Chips, Dandy, and Hotspur, which are all dated from the pre-1940s. William awoke the following morning to bright sun coming through the windows, which alarmed him because he remembered closing the curtains before going to sleep. He quickly dressed and opened the bedroom door and called out, "Hello, hello!" But there was no response. He walked into the living room and found that all of the furniture was covered in drapes, and as he entered the kitchen, he found that everything was covered in thick dust and had obviously not been used in years. Where was the elderly lady? As she was nowhere to be seen. Realizing that something was not quite right, he quickly stuffed his belongings into his bag, but not before leaving £3 on the table. He ran to his lorry and drove like a bat out of hell. William kept this strange experience to himself for many years, but one day he was detailed to drive 2 RAF officers to Cheltenham and decided to tell them his strange story. They asked him whether he could remember the location of the house, so he later tried to find it, but found that a modern housing estate has since been built, so everything in the area had now changed. However, he eventually recognised the lane and asked a local newsagent about the neighbourhood. He told him that it had been the site of an ordnance munitions establishment during the war, and a huge explosion had flattened the area. He had never heard of a local bed and breakfast. So, had William Morris experienced a time slip, or had he entered into a parallel dimension? Glenn Johnson, Oklahoma. Glenn Johnson became interested in time slip after he experienced a bizarre event in 2007. Glenn had just left Duncan, Oklahoma, and headed for Comanche, Oklahoma, which was a distance of about 9 miles, and decided to take some back roads through Empire, Oklahoma. As he was driving, he could see a thunderstorm was approaching and thought he'd better get home quickly. But as he drove into Empire Road, he suddenly found that it was no longer paved, but was now a gravelly dirt road. He figured he'd made a wrong turn and continued driving along the dirt road. As he was driving along the road, he noticed a gas station that he'd never seen before. It had old gas pumps that looked as if they were from the 1950s. There were old hubcaps hanging on the walls of the gas station. As he looked around, he noticed some mobile homes that looked old-fashioned, like they were from the 1970s. Glenn continued to look at his surroundings and noticed that the vehicles that were parked in front of the mobile homes looked to be from the 60s or 70s and appeared to be in mint condition. Although he was totally fascinated at what he was seeing, he was also concerned about the approaching storm, as it was now getting dark and he needed to get home before the storm reached him. As he continued to drive, the weather began to ease slightly as he continued driving along the dirt road that he believed was Empire Road. As he continued to drive, the road appeared to go on forever and was beginning to feel uneasy because he was in unfamiliar surroundings and nothing around him looked the slightest bit familiar. He decided to turn down another road in the hope of getting back onto a paved road, or at least find something that looked familiar so he could get his bearings. But all that he could see was more dirt roads and the old-fashioned mobile homes. Glenn decided to drive back to the gas station with the old gas pumps, along with the old hubcaps hanging on the wall. He then spotted an old Coke machine that was full of glass bottles. He saw no cans or plastic bottles. What was even more strange was that although everything was lit up, it was very, very quiet. There was nobody around. Where was everybody? Parked out front was an old 1950s light blue pickup truck. As he continued down the road, he could see that by the types of cars and houses he was observing, it appeared to be sometime in the 1970s. He continued driving down different dirt roads to try and find a way out of the maze, and continued driving for what seemed an hour. He then decided to stop the car and sat there for a while, totally frustrated, and thought he'll try and give it one more go. He looked up ahead and could just see where the gravel road turned into a paved road. He drove on, and once his tires hit the paved road, the storm suddenly returned, and as he looked behind him, he noticed the mobile homes had vanished. It was now raining, and he was anxious to find Highway 81 and get back home. He finally reached the highway and hurried home. A few days later, with clearer weather, still confused by what he had encountered, he decided to head back down Empire Road to try and locate the dirt road, service station, old cars, and mobile homes. But when he reached Empire Road, he found it was all paved, and he couldn't find any dirt roads. He tried to locate the old gas station, but it was not there either. However, he did come across an empty field with bits of old concrete that would have once been the foundation of the service station. He was now scratching his head trying to figure out whether he had driven down the wrong road or whether it was the right road but at the wrong time. Empire Road as it was in the 70s. Even the mobile homes were gone, where some had been replaced with newer homes. He decided to ask around about Empire Road, and when it was last a dirt road, and they said it was paved back in the 1980s. He asked about the old gas station, and an old-timer told him that there was a gas station there, but it was torn down in 1987. The last time it was a service station was in 1981. As is common with many time slips, there are never any people around, and everything is deathly still and silent.